aren't the major.
Let's look at the political news today. President Jacob Zuma axed 3 of his ministers in a cabinet reshuffle today. Communication Minister Dina Pule, Human Settlements Minister Turkey Sekhwali, and Cooperative Governance Minister Richard Baloy. They were the ones that were out. The 4th time in President Zuma's term that he has reshuffled the cabinet since 2009. Now, independent political analyst Daniel Silke joins us from Cape Town for more on this move. Daniel, your reading of this, what should we be thinking about when we look at this reshuffle?
Well, I suppose we should be thinking about the fact that we've probably got less than a year to go before the general election next year, and this was probably the last of the major reshuffles that will occur before 2014. So in other words, what Jacob Zuma was trying to do was he was trying to show that A, he's the boss, that B, he's getting rid of some dead wood that haven't performed in cabinet over the last couple of years, that C, he's removing some of his political enemies, and D, he's installing some new ministers that actually might well contribute to better delivery. And I think those are the 4 large themes of this cabinet reshuffle.
Daniel, I've got Viv Govender and Wayne McCurry. Viv's got a question for you.
Yeah, you said this was the 4th, basically it's the yearly thing that he does. And I've heard many commentators mention the fact that when a new minister comes into play, they often want to basically put in their own plans for a department. So that's one of the reasons we've had such major delays in places, for instance, like the telecom sector, is because every time you put a new minister into play, there's a learning period involved, there's a whole period in which some of the stuff that was actually being implemented by the previous minister is going to be replaced. Is this actually a good way to run a government, to replace your ministers every year or so?
Now, look, I agree with you 100%. I mean, in the case, indeed, we've seen that some of these ministers have barely been in office for 1 year. They've barely had a chance to even put their own stamp on a department, and they, in fact, can't be expected to get to grips with the intricacies and historical complexities within these departments, particularly in communications. Now, if you set aside some of the personal issues regarding corruption and allegations of impropriety with that particular minister, it's very difficult to deal with vested interests within these various sectors, to get buy-in from them in a short space of time, the political linkages. I think that this turnover of ministers that we are seeing is not healthy for the country, and we really need to have very strong leadership at ministerial level, accountable leadership at ministerial level, and they should be allowed, in fact, as long as they perform, to remain in position for some time to try and accomplish what they've set out to do.
Right. Daniel, Wayne, there are only 2 ministers left over from the very first ANC administration, and one of them is Trevor Manuel. Do you think there's wide acceptance of his plan in government? Because ultimately, that's what really counts.
Well, I certainly agree that the National Development Plan of Manuel is clearly the roadmap forward. There are controversial issues surrounding it. Not everybody likes it, but broadly speaking, there's been buy-in from the business community to it, from opposition parties in South Africa, and from elements within government. I mean, the NDP was accepted as government policy at Mangaung last year. So clearly, Manuel has a particular interest in steering this plan, at least kick-starting it in some form or other. I think the plan, though, as it is at the moment, frankly, is in danger of simply disappearing. It's in danger of being objected to by some of the key elements within the alliance. And we saw today, over the course of the last 24 hours, that COSATU have asked for a relook largely at the entire plan, not just at aspects of the plan, to bring it more into line with aspects of alliance policy. So I think this plan currently is in danger. And what interests me, I suppose, from a cabinet issue is just how long is Trevor Manuel prepared to be at the helm of this NDP ship? Or in fact, is this NDP ship going to hit an iceberg and lose its captain in the course of that process?
I'd like to use another maritime image, Daniel, and that's it's becalmed. It's in the doldrums. There's no wind. And in the old days, the captain would stand on the bridge and whistle to whistle up a wind, and that's what Trevor Manuel's doing at the moment, trying to whistle up a wind, and there's no wind coming. Let's be cynical and say he could afford to get rid of Dina Pule and Turkey Sekhwali. Firstly, because Dina Pule is under personal investigation. And secondly, Turkey Sekhwali, I think the president realizes his support base is small. He doesn't work at building a support base, and he stood against him at Mangaung. So it's a personal thing, and it gives space for other moves on the chessboard, as opposed to worrying about delivery.
Look, I still think delivery is critical. I mean, for all the cynicism that I suppose we can have about how politicians play politics, and I think you have to accept the fact that in this particular shuffle, a trade unionist was brought in, a number of members of the Communist Party were brought into ministerial positions, which obviously satisfies the alliance and plays politics, so to speak. To me, it's still critical that government look as though they are serious about delivering and look as though they are serious about tackling corruption. I mean, at the end of the day, we are moving towards an election. On the ground, South Africans are less satisfied than they've ever been before. Jacob Zuma's own individual rankings, his approval rankings, are the lowest they have been. And ultimately, it's just services on the ground. It's looking for relatively clean administration. In fact, two rather simple issues philosophically, which seem to be very difficult to accomplish in practice in this country. This is the image that I think this kind of reshuffle needs to get across. And in a sense, I suppose Zuma did accomplish some of that. But I must tell you, it wasn't really accomplished with a great flourish. It was a very short announcement. It's not as though Jacob Zuma announced too much else. He could have spoken about the National Prosecuting Authority and vacancies there. There was a lot left to the imagination, in fact, in this announcement.
Well, that was Daniel Silke. Thanks, Daniel. He is an independent political analyst, cramming a lot into a short time on Business Tonight. And that is all the time we have for